Practice 2 is in the books.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's site editor with Athlon Sports. It's Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up now and stay energized. Lars, just a quick reminder to all the everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Games on Music, follow us there, hit that subscribe button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post any new videos, because we're posting all kinds of stuff from spring practice, where we just came from today. Follow us on all forms of social media as well, at Locked On Huskies, because we're posting a bunch of other stuff over there as well, because we got so much to talk about from spring practice today. We're going to close out with a little more basketball because I know we talk about big fish with Jedd Fisch, obviously, all the time. Danny Sprinkle got some big fish today. We're going to just give a nice overview of all the things we saw at today's practice as we record this on Thursday. But Lars, we got this question from our buddy Mark Coleman in the comment section. We got him from, I swear, I had 4 different people ask me this question. They said, hey, who are some under the radar guys that have been standing out? So who's your first one?
So I'm gonna, well, first of all, A+ wordplay on that with the fish, that just A+ wordplay. But with that being said, it's not necessarily a guy that's been standing out because, again, it's only 2 days. We haven't seen a huge amount of even 11-on-11 work. But
sorry, one other thing. I just want to make this clear off the top. We haven't seen full pads yet. The first day of full pads will be Saturday.
Yeah, but beside the point, so everything is kind of like you're in shells. You're just basically it's the first 2 days of walkthrough, get out there. But what's intriguing to me, and I'm curious to see how this develops later on in the spring, Hayden Moore was working out with the edge rushers today.
Yeah,
and he was not on, and he was not on Tuesday. And so to me, again, it's when you say under the radar, it's basically everything flies under the radar except, well, I can't say like, hey, he was looking good with the edge rushers, but I will say having his background as a true inside linebacker did look good when he was going through some kind of coverage drills. And so you could see maybe what the philosophy is. And then you look at the linebacker room and think at inside linebacker, yeah, you got plenty of guys there. So the only way Hayden's going to see the field is if he can use his athleticism, which he does have a significant amount of. So I'm just curious to see kind of how that develops, because you look at the rest of that room and it's like, yeah, the room checks out, but how is that guy going to play a role?
So this is somebody you mentioned yesterday that I kind of feel the same way about, that I'm a little more intrigued by. I do have a true under the radar guy I'm going to get to in 1 second. But as long as we're on that topic, I want to talk about Deshaun Lynch, because you and I were talking about him the other day. I was talking about him with our buddy Andy Yamashita from the Seattle Times today at practice. And it's one of those things where he is a really, really good athlete. And he was at his best at Sacramento State when he was that stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker type. So I'm curious to see what his role is going to be in that sort of sense, where you and I talked about him last year as, hey, maybe he's going to be an interior guy. Didn't necessarily get a whole lot of run there. So I'm intrigued to see if this role might suit him a little bit better. But I want to stay in the front 7 here, because one guy who I've been really impressed by just watching him move now that he's had a year to develop in the strength program, that's Omar Khan, where the more I watch Omar Khan, the more I say, yeah, this is going to be a guy where, we talk about the advantageous one-on-one matchups that this Ryan Walter scheme is going to bring at a whole bunch of different points in time. I think Omar Khan might be one of the best suited players to take advantage of that because of his background as a wrestler. We got to remember this. Undefeated state champion wrestler in Texas. So he's already got that toughness, that grit, that just power in his lower body that I don't think he had fully unlocked as a pass rusher in high school. So as we get into full pads, I'm curious to see how that part might develop in his game. But the more that I look at just what he's going to be able to do with his floor as a run stuffing defender, I'm very intrigued by him. I think he's shown a lot of flashes just in terms of, as you said, it's not necessarily a walkthrough. It's a little bit of a step up from that in shells. So you're not going to see everything, which is why I think this is a great question and something we're going to continue to come back to time and again. But when I saw that, watching practice today with that in mind, Omar Khan was the first guy where I was like, yeah, I think that he adds really, really necessary depth to this defensive line.
There's a Wrath of Khan reference in there somewhere. But with that being said, no, I completely agree. I completely agree with everything you said. And it's one of those guys where you look at, there's so much depth along the defensive line. It's a good problem to have. But one thing that Jedd Fisch has made clear as a hallmark of this program, if you're a younger guy and you happen to flat like that, we're going to keep giving you more and more chances, which leads into my guy, another guy we have talked about plenty on the show, not a ton, but enough. Jacob Blaine had an interception today, was making some plays during the scrimmage portions of practice. And to me, again, you just look at, similar to Omar Khan, like how can Ryan Walters and Jason Kabusi use these guys maybe together, or just kind of because there's so much potential in this defense, and it's going to get to. I do want to make one more reference to somebody else later on in this segment. He's not necessarily an under the radar guy, but I do think, again, given how his production was last season, I think it's worth kind of mentioning him again, what he did today. But you look at Jacob Blaine and you look at Omar Khan and you think, man, like two young guys who still have plenty of ability and production that you really don't have a position for. And that's a good problem to have, because that means Ryan Walters' scheme is bringing the best out of him, because they could be, outside or inside. Jacob Blaine probably more so on the outside. But either way, depending on the package, you're talking about guys that you can turn to, and they've shown in practice and in games, more so Jacob Blaine in games. But Omar Khan, I certainly agree this season will get a significant amount of game reps, just because, barring a setback, which again, I think it goes back to what you hit on with the wrestling background, where you know how to take guys down. You know how to do that without pads on, without helmets on, without anything. You got singlet or whatever they wear. I don't know. But my point being that, I don't know if it's that bold, but my point being that when you add full pads, like you mentioned today, where it's like these guys that stand out, or you catch their eye when they don't have the pads on, it's like, just imagine what it's like when they do, because then they become even tougher to get down and things like that. And so Omar Khan, I completely agree, but I'd also throw Jacob Blaine in that same kind of similar conversation.
No, I like where you're going with that, where we did see him line up as, in that 3-4 defensive end sort of role, like a 4-I-5 technique today. So I'm curious to see what happens with that. I want to jump over to the offensive side, and I don't necessarily know if this counts, because he's somebody we're really high on, and I like where his progression is going. I want to talk about Hayden for a second, where, I've spent some time on Justice Williams over the last couple of days, and this receiving core is really young. Jedd Fisch is very, very high on it. He told us so after the first practice, and there is a lot to like, right? There's a lot of very promising players all over, where, whether it's Marcus Harris, Chris Lawson, we saw both those guys make plays today as well. But I was watching Hayden, and there was a play where he went deep down the near sideline in front of us on the east field, and Damon just missed him. He overthrew him just a little bit, but it was just one of those things where you see it, right? And it's something where when we talked to Damon after practice, he told us, yeah, we're still getting that chemistry down. It's day 2, so there's some things that we still need to work through. But you see the vision with a player like that, where it's very clear that he is just physically ready to play early on if necessary, where, we saw them throw Audric Harris out there last year, and we've had this discussion before, right? Who would be the one player? I don't necessarily know if it's Hayden, but I don't think that's going to matter at this point in time, or if there's one player at that position to burn their red shirt, where, could be Chris Lawson, could be Marcus Harris, right? But all three of those guys add something different to this offense. And I think Hayden's speed and ability to stretch the field might end up setting him apart. But Lars, before we move on, you said you had one more guy.
So I did. I'm actually going to kick the one that I was initially going to talk about into the second segment, because it fits a little bit more. But in that similar way, Chris Lawson is a guy that I think has really flashed in the first couple of days, but especially today, where he's making catches. And I remember, I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but when I went to that NIL event a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody come up to me and be like, hey, like, are those guys in the NFL? Or are they going to be in the NFL? And I'm like, well, they're all freshmen, but that guy, and that guy, I would be willing to bet in 3 or 4 years you're going to hear their name. And I wouldn't say first round, second round, whatever, but they will end up in the NFL. One of the guys that I pointed to, Chris Lawson. And you just look and see where he's got the size, he's got the ability. Whether it was a fringe 3-star or 4-star, it's like you just see it where he's showing up and making plays. And I mean, ironically, in a way where I think Marcus Harris has had one drop each day at practice, and I haven't really seen that from Chris. And I'm not, but you're not nitpicking, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, like, yeah, we all talk about Marcus Harris and all this sort of thing, and Hayden Vine's right in that similar light. But Chris Lawson kind of a guy where it's like, hey, like, I'm here, I'm good. Like, and why watch me end up being the most productive of the three? And that's not a bad thing, because they're all going to be productive. But if Chris happens to be the most productive, I wouldn't be surprised.
Stay tuned for Lars's next guy. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, you want to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens. Fabric gives you that peace of mind. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. We've also got a message from our friends over at Prize Picks. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash with strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm picking Aaron Judge for more than 1 home run and Christian Campbell for more than 1.5 hits. It's that easy. Setting up a lineup takes less than 60 seconds, and when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. I always take advantage of Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks offers discounts on select player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use the code LOCKDOWNCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKDOWNCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineups. Prize Picks, run your game. Lars, you had another guy. I'm just going to hand the floor right back over to you.
Yeah, so now you'll understand why this fits way more in the second segment, which is the overview of the second practice. What's something that happened on Tuesday that happened on Thursday?
That happened on Tuesday, and
Tariq Al-Uqdah had a pick. Yeah, first one was against Shaker Kendall on Tuesday, and today was against Damon Williams. And you know, a couple of people you included asked me, was it tipped? Was it at the line? I'm like, no, it was just the Indiana game. And you knew exactly what I meant, where it's right over the middle. And I was like, okay, we'll have that one back. But also, I think it's worth noting Jimmy Doherty and Damon kind of both talked about, okay, this defense is presenting challenges, which is a good thing. It's, again, now you're seeing a seasoned veteran Big 12 coach, or Big 10 coach come over and already saying, hey, I know what the Big 10 is. I know how to throw different looks at you, because we saw that from Damon last season. And it's good now that Damon's getting that in practice, where Damon usually doesn't make the same mistake twice. And the other pick that he had today, I do believe that one was tipped, or that one was in kind of
that one looked like he just missed high. I had a decent view on that one. No, please, I'm sorry, continue.
But my point is, it was like, you know, Damon, again, when we talk about, hey, Damon's throwing interceptions, should we be concerned? No, not at all. My point is, it's more of a good sign on the defense, that I think Buddha is kind of being that guy that's shining, because you know, when I saw him today, he was covering Jonah in the flat, and they both, Buddha wears 3, Jonah wears 1. I'm like, take out the jerseys. Which one is which?
I'm so glad you said that, because that was a conversation Andy Yamashita and I were having where, these guys look so very similar. Yeah. Which is fun, right? And also when you talk about Buddha, one of the very interesting things about, I don't know if it's interesting. It's, you know, it's exactly what we've been talking about all offseason. So we've made that point time and again. He finds ways to get around the football. He makes plays. He's a playmaking linebacker, where you look at him next to X-Ray Alexander, and it's one of those things where, wait, you two play the same position, because they're just very different body types, right? But they both bring something very unique to the table, where X is a big downhill thumping sort of guy, and Buddha can absolutely, you know, lay hits out with the best of them, but he just finds ways to create turnovers in the middle of the field and get to the football, which is something that we didn't see this defense do very often last year, because Carson Bruner did a fantastic job of that in the USC game. But having another guy like that at the position is really exciting. And it's, you know, when we see Zajic Rani-Saleh, when he's able to step on the field, he looks like he could bring that same sort of presence, because we've seen that in his high school film, right? Where I'm just curious to see what that's going to look like moving forward. I've been impressed with Jonathan Epperson as well at the position, where he has really added a lot of mass and looks like he's going to be a fun player to watch the position. But let's talk about that second interception, because I don't remember any point last season where Damon threw multiple interceptions in a practice. I could certainly be wrong about that, but that's just off the top of my head. That's what I was thinking when we were on the field. And the second one, he's rolling to his right, and he misses high. It looked like he was looking for a tight end. Couldn't really see who he was who he was aiming for, but he just missed high, and Jacob Lane was just right there. He was playing defensive line and dropped into coverage and made a play on the ball. So I say all that to say he, had a few just not pretty throws, and Jimmy Doherty talked about him after and said, we'll get in the film room, we'll make sure those get right. But he also made just a spectacular play today that we need to talk about, where we're standing there with our buddy Alex Katzen, and he made the, as Alex referenced, that's why I got to make sure I shout him out there, the Zach Wilson pro day jump throw that we also saw Caleb Williams make to Rome Odunze for a touchdown on Thursday Night Football that got called back against the Seahawks for a holding penalty, where just that jump throw, and he dropped it right in the bucket. And Lars, who did he throw it to on that play? Do you remember?
Was it Rashid or Omari?
No, it was Raiden Weisbright.
That throw. Oh, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, and that's why I referenced him a little bit earlier. See, it all comes full circle here on Locked On Huskies. And I was so impressed with that throw. And it's one of those things where, we saw the highs, we saw the lows, and we saw DeMond, obviously make a couple of mistakes at different points last year. The interception in the Sun Bowl and the fumble against Eastern Michigan. But as you said, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. So I'm very curious to see how he, is able to move forward from those interceptions and pair them with the high end, incredible rushing ability that we've seen, plus that athleticism and that sort of arm talent, and just continue to move forward, which is why Jedd Fisch is so high on him.
Yeah. And I think, it's why the ceiling for DeMond is so high, not because he's short, but because the potential, the talent is so there. It's already there, and we've seen it. It's really been, every time you watch him, it's kind of just like, it's almost become where you don't want to put the Michael Penix expectations right there already, but the character make of the two, you kind of just like, that's how it translates on the field, where nothing seems to faze him, where when he's making those throws or when he's missing guys long like Mike did, it's okay, but you're missing at a good position like that. If you're going to miss exactly right there, where when you mentioned the 2 interceptions, it's, again, defense got you. Like sometimes that's just good coaching. That's not bad play. That's good coaching. That's why you go and pay Ryan Walters the money to set up this defense. Whereas Belichick, it was like, cool, like you're getting the name, you're getting the cachet, and a pretty good defense to go along with it. But now you're thinking in year 2, let's step things up. Same thing with DeMond, where now I'm curious to see on Saturday and next Tuesday, do those mistakes still consist? Where he's, hey, there's another one. Yep, there's another one. Right. And now it's like, ooh, well, is the learning curve a little, because I don't think either of us right now, like I don't get the sense that DeMond's going to hit a sophomore slump. Now there might be a sophomore like slide where it's like, we might have to work around some things just when teams start to game plan for him and things like that. When people start to find out more of how he works. But I don't see that being a significant drop from the ascension that he's currently on.
So I want to talk about one of the guys next to him that really shined, in my opinion, today. And it's somebody you and I have certainly had a few conversations about. It's not Jonah Coleman. It's not Adam Muhammad. It's Jordan Washington, where I noticed walking off the field on Tuesday where Jedd Fisch said, yeah, he's put on 21 pounds this offseason. You could absolutely see it. And then today it was one of those things where, again, as we said, half shells, you're not tackling. But just the way that he was able to just kind of slither through defenders, he looked way more physical than he did at any point last season, obviously because he was, 160 pounds? Now that he's up to 183, he still shows that top-end speed. Plus, if you're able to add a little bit of physicality and the ability to take hits, you can stretch the field with him. You can find ways to get him outside the tackle box, whether it's, on sweeps, whatever it might be, to just put the ball in his hands, get him in space, and let him go to work. But if you compare that with the ability to run through the tackles, like just run between the tackles, I truly think that Washington could have one of the best running back cores in the Big Ten. And we've seen that, right? We've heard that from Jedd, from Jimmy Doherty, about Jonah Coleman, about Adam Muhammad. And he always likes to throw Jordan Washington into that bucket as well, because we know what he brings to the table. He was the highest ranked recruit out of all those guys. Not that matters once you get on campus, but it's just a proving what kind of athleticism he has and what kind of potential, other people seem to believe that he has. So adding him to this room this coming season just can add such a unique mix of skill sets. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, if you want a dynamic offense, you have to have different dynamics in play, where Jonah is different than Adam, and Adam is different than Jordan, and Jordan is different than Jonah. And you just build off that triangle where everything is gonna feed off of each other. But yeah, just watching Jordan Washington early on in practice, they were doing some early 11-on-11 drills. It was like, man, like you can see where he's not slowed down at all, where you needed to add some weight, but now you don't need to go up to 190, 190. You don't need to add a ton more because already you can see he also has great vision. That's the other thing. His vision is going to save himself from having to take physicality, but he's still going to be able to have the body to handle the hits that you're going to take in the Big Ten.
Lars, we got to get to these big fish. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. With longer days, I love getting outside for a hike or a run. Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So, Lars, I woke up this morning, I look at my phone, and the first thing I see, Hannes Steinbach is committing to Washington. And I said, oh, this is really interesting. And then I said, oh, it's 6 a.m. and I need to get up and start writing right away. Because that wasn't one that, we had a little conversation about this with a couple of our insiders this morning as well. That wasn't one you and I saw coming because they usually do a really good job of keeping a lot of this international stuff under wraps. But you turn on the tape and you say, this is, especially after, Nick Davidson ends up at Clemson, Magoon Gwath goes back to San Diego State. I look at this and I say, oh yeah, a guy with, 4 years of eligibility that you can work with. I like this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, average a double-double, like at 8, and he's already 18. So you're not worried about, gotta, break him in. So coming in 17, 18, that sort of thing. Like seems like an established guy now, still has, like you mentioned, 4 years. It's not the same thing as Dominic Diamande where he already had that true pro experience, but he does have some European experience as well. So
he has plenty where he played, I believe it was 23 games in the Bundesliga in the top league over there in Germany. And you're talking about the double-double. He thrived with their academy team over 12 games, 25 points and 12.5 rebounds. It's certainly very impressive.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And knowing that he's already had that experience, it's okay. That shouldn't be an issue leveling up to the Big Ten and the physicality in that stretch. Because what is it, 6'10", I think, somewhere at 240, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly, but again, you're looking at it's more or less the 6'10" that is what you're looking at. Where Wilhelm was in that range, but this is a different level of athleticism. And it's no slight at Wilhelm. He could do some things, but it's having both on a consistent night in, night out basis. That's something Danny just hasn't had at Washington.
So that's certainly a big part of it. The thing that stood out for me is the basketball IQ, where he's a very smart player. And, for me, I went and there were a couple of nice little draft guides that I wrote out there. I linked them all over on Huskies Wire. You can go check them out over there. One of the most important things that I learned, after a couple minutes of reading up on the guy was he is the son of a former player over there, of a former international professional. So that's really nice to see as well. And you see that. You see, it's a lot like what we talk about with some of these guys in the football field, where Justice Williams is the name I like to bring up because I'm just still super high on the kid. And it's, I'm totally not surprised to find out that your dad played tight end in the NFL. It all adds up. It all makes sense. And it's the same thing in this case where you watch the film and you say, oh yeah, the way he just makes decisions when he's defending, the way he reads certain plays, the way he cuts the hoop, the way he plays pick and rolls on both sides, on offense and defense, is really, really impressive. And moving forward, I say, okay, I feel a lot more comfortable with this front court going into year two. Obviously, assuming everybody stays healthy, with Frank Kepnang in the mix, with Nico Bondalo, with Matty Traore coming in, and then Lathan Somerville, and now Steinbach on top. That's a really, really nice room where you say, okay. And this is also something where, assuming things go well in Danny Sprinkle's second year, you can build something with it long term.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like you're building, and that's why I think it's not necessarily gutting the roster, but kind of just cleaning it aside from Frank and Zoom really does allow you, like, hey, you know what? Now you guys are the two core. We're going to reset the foundation, but now it's going to be my guys. And I think you're looking at it, you hit on all those names, it's depth. Whether, like, if somebody else goes, whether Frank does go down, you have Maddie and you have other options now behind them, and you look and think, okay, good. You can go and kind of work in some different systems based off of that, because you don't have to just lean on one specific guy. And if that doesn't go, now the whole thing starts falling apart. You have a strong depth in the front court overall.
So we wanted to do this in chronological order. We wanted to start with what happened earlier in the day, or I know this is the bigger addition. Getting Quimari Peterson from East Tennessee State is a massive addition for this squad, where Danny Sprinkle has talked about getting an experienced shot maker that you can turn to late in the clock and who can take these, wild step back threes that go down. Quimari Peterson did that at East Tennessee State. Yeah, it's a lower level, but he was the SoCon Player of the Year, 19.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.7 assists per game. All that's really nice. Lars, 42.4% from behind the three-point line this season. That is top 20 in the NCAA. Now, this roster is far from complete. Far from it. But one thing that we shared a little bit with our everydayers was there were a few concerns when, you weren't getting any of these recruits to commit somewhat early on in the process. You're waiting it out. And then all of a sudden you get Lathan Somerville, and now the positive momentum is starting to roll, and it's, okay, yeah, the staff can sell. The NIL budget is there, because this is one of those guys where you're not getting them if you don't have deep pockets. So it's nice to see that on top of it. And it's also this dark cloud that has kind of formed around this program. You've made the tournament 3 times since 2010. That's something that is certainly can turn some recruits off and say, oh yeah, I like that, but this other school is offering me similar dollars, and hey, they've made, they're not necessarily a successful program, but they've made the tournament way more often in recent years. So it's nice to see that this sales pitch from Danny Sprinkle and his coaching staff worked.
Yeah, I mean, you basically hit on everything. Like, it's encompassing of that's why you went out and got Danny Sprinkle and just said, we need to cut bait with Mike Hopkins. We need to reset with a guy who's been not necessarily a proven head coach in terms of he hasn't been 10 plus years in doing it as a head coach, but you can clearly see he built it at Montana State, had what he had at Utah State, and now can try and replicate more so Montana State at Washington. And it's, hey, winners win, and guys and Danny has that energy where guys want to gravitate towards it. And I think that's why when you look and say, wow, you're coming in now with a lot more freshmen, got to build through the portal again. But I think Danny is doing it the right way. And that's kind of why, again, when he said, hey, it might take a couple of years, but once we get to year 2 and 3 and 4, now we're talking about, hey, NCAA tournament in year 2, 3, 4, 5, and you just keep on building that.
Sure.
Whereas, and similar to kind of what you were saying, where if I give you an either or, Brock Harding or Peterson.
Oh, it's Quimari Peterson 11 times.
And so exactly, it's when you see some of these guys come off the board early, and that's why I mentioned on the show, I think it was yesterday or last week or whenever it was, when it was, look, I'm not saying, because again, hey, we didn't want him anyways. That's it.
Right.
Every now and then you have that, but it's really, it's okay. Like sometimes it's okay to let somebody else commit somewhere else because you're willing to bet on yourself. And that's something Danny absolutely does, is bet on himself. And so I think he knows what he has works. And so it's just a matter of making sure he's getting the right guys, and waiting for Peterson was absolutely the right choice.
Oh, I agree. Where I don't personally believe it was a choice of one or the other in this case, right? Where I just these are things we hear in the comments sometimes. But I don't think that's the case here. Where you certainly could have had both if you wanted to, but you're right. If you need to go down one of these two paths, you take Quimari Peterson, who's bigger, a little bit stronger of a defender. So that's certainly something that's important here. But I kind of want to dive into this future thing a little bit, where I think that adding Quimari Peterson is a really nice step towards, what you can build towards, right? Where Danny has talked about building something sustainable, which, like Jedd Fisch on the football side of things, it starts at the high school level, where you need to bring in some of these elite recruits, and one and dones are certainly a thing. Getting guys from the transfer portal has become an integral part of the game, right? Look at there was some Sweet 16 graphic I saw where look at where all these starters from these Sweet 16 programs came from. There was one team that had all 5 starters that committed to them out of high school. Lars, do you know what team that was?
You got me off the top of my head. Who was it?
Purdue. So, there is a program in the Big Ten where you could say, all right, it is possible to build a sustainable program out of just high school recruiting, but the transfer portal is still an important part of that, right? And I look at what you can do with an addition like this, and let's say things do go well for Quimari Peterson next season. All of a sudden, it just continues to open doors for you. And we know that was something we expected from Danny in year one, but it didn't happen that way. And now in year two, he's talked about changing his recruiting strategy, changing a whole bunch of different things in terms of the way he's going to go about just life off the court and just the interview process with players. And if this is the end result of that, if I were somebody who just dedicated everything to basketball and said, I need this program to be successful, I would be willing to hear him out and see what that's going to look like and let him build a roster before I make any judgments.
Exactly. And that's, like I said, that's why you go and get a guy like Danny, where he knows how to build a program. Yeah, you're going to have to take a little bit of bumps and bruises, and especially leveling up in the Pac-12 to the Big Ten and new coach, new conference, new team. Like, yeah, we might have set the bar high. Yeah, this could be a tournament team, if everyone stays healthy and all that. But now you're looking at, like you mentioned, to kind of tie this whole thing together. Washington should be a destination. You should be making the tournament every year, or at least every other year at the very minimum. But it probably should be at least on some level be a tournament team every year. Now, where you go, whether it's round of 32, Sweet 16, Elite 8, so be it. You figure that out at the end. And that's also why it's important to build with youth, because you have JJ for 2 years, 3 years. You have Zoom for 2 years, 3 years. I don't know if those guys are going to be 4-year guys, just because at some point you're going to have them go on to the NBA. But you look and think, hey, I'm going to develop you all the way through until you're a finished product, and then I'll let you on to the next level. But Washington, you can do it at Washington. That's the whole point. And I think Danny being the guy to say, you know what, I'm going to plant my flag here. I'm not looking elsewhere. Let's do it right.
Lars, fantastic point as always. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout spring practice. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.